over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live, wherever you're joining us live from on that interweb, good morning and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. If you're listening to the podcast, you'll recognize that it is Dave Manouk in the host chair today with my main man, Ezzy Ginsburg. Drew is away from the show, but we do expect him to join us tonight on the Illegal Curve post-game show. That's right, 2 Illegal Curve broadcasts coming your way today because the Jets will conclude their home set with the Colorado Avalanche. That's an easy team to play. It's only the number 1 team in the NHL. And to set up that game, we will be talking to play-by-play voice Dan Robertson in about half an hour's time. And then Meghan Angley will come and give us the Avalanche perspective because she covers the 2 Colorado teams better than anyone in the market. So we will get insight into the Avs from Meghan. But until then, it will be Ezzy and I driving the bus, driving the boat, driving whatever we feel like driving, Ezzy, in order to discuss the Jets and the Moose and anything else and some prospect talk here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. So first, I will start by asking you, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. I'm always doing well when it's a Saturday morning, and I've got a cup of coffee here from McDonald's. Ordered a little skip the dishes this morning for myself and the kids.
Wow.
And this is the 3rd weekend in a row we're going to have a double dose of IC on Saturday, right? We had some afternoon games the last 2 weekends, and then we've got the early evening game between the Jets and the Avalanche. I love these little mini series, I got to say. Like, you don't see them too often during the regular season. And obviously a couple years ago, we saw a 7-game series between the Jets and the Avalanche, but this is the definition of do or die. The Jets got lucky, obviously, Dave, last weekend with last game on Thursday with Nashville losing and the Jets not losing any ground. But as we know, other teams picked up points. So This is really the season for the Jets. I know a lot of people want to write the Jets off, but mathematically they're still in it, and crazier things have happened, right? Like the Jets will probably have to win 8 or 9 of these last 10 games to give themselves a good shot at making the playoffs. But as long as the Jets aren't mathematically eliminated, Dave, we're still going to keep that little glimmer of hope alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the discussion points. That's something we have to talk about. I know sometimes folks don't like it, but the reality is until we know that they are not able to clinch a spot, then the discussion will continue until that reality becomes reality. And then we will, move on to the next item of business, which, I guess what I would caution folks is, listen, the draft is until the end of June. So we'll be talking plenty about who the Jets could draft with pick X. There'll be plenty of time for that. Until the season is over, we'll continue to talk about the current season, not look ahead to the draft season.
I think we'll also be talking about, Dave, whether the Jets are going to move their first round pick, regardless if it's 6th overall or 8th overall, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's a fair point by you, Ez. But I guess we'll go through the housekeeping matters in case folks, I would hope that folks were on illegalcurve.com, even when the broadcasts aren't live, because then they can pay attention to what's going on with the Jets since we cover them like no other. And of course, you'd know that Morgan Barron was in concussion protocol after his big fight with Josh Manson, probably a fight he didn't need to get engaged in, but he did nonetheless.
Dave, was the concussion from the fight or the hit though? That was an old school, like, I don't know if this crossed your mind when that hit happened, but like to me that was like a Rock'em, like that hit would have been on Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em videos. Like that was a big boy hit.
It was. I didn't have a problem with it. I can understand why Barron didn't like it, but I thought it was fine. But Manson was getting a penalty. Barron went to handle it, and Barron's a tough guy. He can handle himself. Not exactly a fighter though, but he went, and of course, it's ironic that earlier, it was the day before, I think we talked to Barron, and he was talking about Nikolai Ehlers and only taking on the heavies, Ezzy. But the fact is that Josh Manson, as we know, son of Dave Manson, old Jets 1.0 defenseman, is a tough customer. And so
Josh Manson is one of the tougher guys in the NHL, I would say.
Yeah. So, I mean, so Doug is saying it was a hit to the head. Okay. Yeah. I mean, some people said it was a little bit high, but ultimately.
That's why, sorry, Dave,
Yeah.
I want to go back to you, but like, I'm not joking. I wouldn't be surprised if the concussion was the result of the hit, not the fight. Like, and it's obviously, we're not going to know that.
Yeah.
But that was a big hit. And Morgan Barron, you could like, you just got the feeling after that hit that, you know, it's actually incredible that he got up and fought Manson after taking that hit.
Well, you know, you're right, Ezzy. And so and it's not just the punch, but apparently his face smoked the ice as well, right? So, I mean, there are a number of factors. Ultimately, you could see as they were kind of trying to take him to the penalty box and then realize, like, we got to get this guy down the tunnel, that, you know, he was definitely not he was not feeling good. So, as I said, I shouldn't say that he had a concussion, but he is in concussion protocol. And
I'm sorry, I wanted to mention, Dave, that obviously we hope that Morgan Barron is going to be okay. And that's the most important thing. Right? Like, you know, everyone talks about the fight, and yeah, everyone loves fighting and hockey and everything like that. But I mean, we want Morgan Barron to be back on the ice as soon as possible. That's the most important thing, obviously.
For sure. And Doug's confirming what I said, which is that Manson also drove his head into the ice. Yeah, that's kind of like as I guess what we're illustrating is that there are a number of points of contact, including his fists, including the hit, and then, you know, his head hitting the ice. So before we get back to that, how did Dallas Pauls get in Osaka, Japan? How do we get that type of gig? Let's take IC to Japan. Shout out to Dallas Pauls, who's listening from Japan. Yeah, Dallas told us last show that he was heading to Japan, and now he is actually in Japan wearing his IC hoodie and hat. So we appreciate the representation in Japan. We appreciate the representation in Transcona.
We're huge in Japan, Dave.
Whatever foreign city you're in, we appreciate that representation of the IC brand. But, you know, getting back, so Morgan Barron, he is in concussion protocol as per head coach Scott Arniel, and we were anticipating the moves, Ezzy. And sure enough, you know me, I'm sitting there like with a dog with it wagging its tail, waiting for the owner to get home. But I was on that NHL media site, and sure enough, Parker Ford's name popped up on it. So I was like, okay. And of course, you know, had I scrolled a little further down on the list, I would have seen Danny Zhilkin, and I could have saved myself having to do two posts, because I could have posted that both guys were, thank you, Andrew Haleko, the professor. I rep in Oakbank. I see in Oakbank, home of Owen Martin.
I have family in Oakbank, so shout out to my family in Oakbank.
Exactly. So you've got sorry, the professor just derailed my train of thought, Ezzy. I don't
Parker Ford, Danny Zhilkin.
Parker Ford, Danny Zhilkin. So the two guys get the emergency recalls, and worth noting they're both emergency recalls. We didn't hear from Scott Arniel yesterday. We only spoke to Eric Comrie, which was probably one of the most entertaining media availabilities that we've, I don't know, I wouldn't say ever done, but it's probably up there. Maybe top 5 for me, Ezzy, in terms of, you know, in all the years I've been covering this team, which now is 15, as have you, that Eric Comrie is probably one of, we love having him as a guest on the show, but he is just animated. And like, you know, the folks at Bardown asked if they could, you know, borrow or like use our video, which was, I said, no problem, but it was very funny. Like he basically
he said, no problem. Give me $500.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so, you know, Eric was very funny. We'll talk about Eric's comments a little bit later, but
let's just say that a certain player on the Jets dominates the ping pong table.
Exactly. But no, we didn't hear from Scott Arniel yesterday, but what we were told was that both of the players are on emergency recalls, and there is potentially a concern for someone else. So we know Morgan Barron's not likely. We didn't really get an update because, unfortunately, like I said, we didn't hear from Scott Arniel. But it is in fact the fact that both Ford and Zhilkin are on emergency recall, which leaves the Jets with 3 regular recalls. Now, my presumption is that Zhilkin will remain with the Jets and will transfer from an emergency to a regular. But as of right now, both guys are emergency recalls, and we'll see what happens there. I think their status would have to change as of after tonight's game, and then we'll figure that out. But for now, both Ford and Zhilkin are possibilities. And of course, Ezzy, they both play center, so they can, either one could replace Morgan Barron if need be. So my question kind of starts there for you is, do you see this coaching staff making it as simple as presumably pulling Morgan Barron from that third line center role or fourth line center role based on the ice time, Isak, Roseanne, and Brad Lambert, and putting either Zhilkin or Ford with those guys, creating a very talented but very young line? Or do you see them sort of mixing and matching a little bit to kind of offset the loss of Morgan Barron?
No, I think, Dave, what you'll probably see is like a plug and play situation where I'm going to assume that it's I'm not going to assume. my gut is telling me that it's going to be Danny Zhilkin that goes into the lineup,
Mhm.
probably because I said that. Scott Arneal's listening, and he's going to put Parker Ford in the lineup. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I think my best guess or my best bet would be that it's Zhilkin that goes and centers that line with Brad Lambert and Isaac Rosen. And you're calling it the fourth line, but I mean, I would call it the third line. I would call the Taves Nyquist line the fourth line, just based on talent, but certainly usage. And we talked about that. I think last game against Colorado, that Barron line really struggled, right? And it's going to be interesting because whether you want to accept it or not, I mean, the Jets are still in the playoff race and they're still trying to win this game. And Scott Arneal and the coaching staff are still making moves with winning in mind. Even if the Jets were mathematically eliminated, Dave, they'd be still trying to win these games, right? Like they're never going to game plan to lose a game.
Yeah.
I mean, that would obviously cause a lot of repercussions, and people would lose their jobs, right? So yeah, I think Danny Zhilkin will probably go in, if not Parker Ford. And like we said, hopefully Morgan is going to be okay because he's obviously having a career year. And again, I'm really impressed that, he dropped the gloves with Josh Manson, because he easily could have been on that ice for a minute and just gone off based on, that was a really big hit. I can't stress that enough, right? Like, Josh Manson, not only is he a big guy, but he's mobile, right? And that was a big hit. So yeah, it's an opportunity for Zhilkin. And I think, as we get, closer and closer to the end of the season, as we know, the Jets are a long shot to make the playoffs. I think you're going to see more guys called up, right? And that's, an interesting point that you bring up, Dave. Like at this time of the year, we're not really quite sure, who it is that might be banged up, that the Jet that might, necessitate a recall. Could it be Scheifele, who also dropped the gloves recently? Again, I wouldn't say so because he scored 2 goals last game, right? So
I seems like he's fine.
I think Scheifele's okay. If he's not okay, then that's just further evidence of how good of a hockey player Mark Scheifele is, that he can drop the gloves and then against Vegas. And speaking of Oakbank, Brett Howden, and then come back and score 2 goals and have one of his better games of the season, right? So yeah, an opportunity for Danny Zhilkin. And I expect that line to get, some significant playing time, Dave. I don't know, I don't know if that's going to be, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 14 minutes, whatever. But we talked about it, like this Avalanche team is so deep, they're going to obviously have the benefit of last change. So Zhilkin's going to go over in there, and Rosen and Lambert, and they're going to be expected to hopefully produce, right? Like obviously Scheifele's line carries the load of the offense, followed by the Lowry line. But I think this is a great opportunity for those 3 youngsters to show what they've got in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a trial by fire. You're not giving them an easy way. You're not dipping your toe into the pool as you're taking a can. And if anybody knows about cannonballs into a pool, it is one Ezra Ginsburg. So that is something that
I like a can opener too, though.
Oh, okay, yeah, I could see you doing the can opener. I mean, raising your knee up to your chest sometimes could be a little bit difficult, but you get it done. You're pretty adept at that. But ultimately, the Jets really, I mean, look, if the folks who are getting upset about the whole discussion of playoffs, go back, I suggest, and listen to our show from 2 months ago when we discussed our feelings as to what this Jets team where they were gonna end up. If you have any questions about that, but I think ultimately you can get a benefit here because you're going to be able to test these guys in a situation where there's a lot of pressure on you. And what Eric Comrie talked about it a bit yesterday in terms of compartmentalizing and being able to just focus on this one game, because it is a daunting task from their perspective. You've got 10 games left. You're down by 5 points. You're, from going from 11 points back to 5 points back, where in a week you were able to remove a 6-point deficit, pretty significant in the NHL. And now, maybe a week or 10 days later from doing that, your deficit has not changed. It's remained the same. So, I mean, while it's all well and good that, like you said, Nashville loses their game the other night, the Jets don't game.
But LA won, Seattle won, right?
That's right. So that's what I mean. So like all the teams, and again, if you're team ethical tank, then you're not upset about that. But if you are, if you are, hopeful for the Jets, then you aren't ecstatic about it. But yes, it is an interesting concept. And it's unfortunate they don't have a morning skate because I don't know why they're not actually having a morning skate, but usually I guess the game starts at 5, so it's a little bit early. Maybe they don't want to. I usually have a morning skate for 6 o'clock game if it was a local.
Yeah, it's early, but it's still not early enough that you couldn't get a game day skate in. I agree with you. I thought there would be one.
Yeah, I guess usually they have one at 6. They would have one at 10:30. So I guess it's just too early to have one. But ultimately they're not going to hit the ice. But so we'll have to wait for warm up ultimately before we find out exactly what is going to happen. But yeah, I mean it is. And look, before folks think that it's a possibility that only one of these guys are getting into the lineup, it could be both. It could be that Parker Ford is also going to be playing for Gus Nyquist. I mean, we don't know. I mean, he may be focusing on his ping pong.
I was going to say maybe Gus Nyquist suffered an injury at the ping pong table.
Well, if you don't know what we're talking about, we'll quickly segue over to that is because we talked to Eric Comrie and Adam Lowry yesterday, and Eric Comrie said some just like hilarious stuff. He was asked about the goalie interference because the Jets, the feature, speaking of Morgan Barron, Elliot Friedman wrote about it in his 32 Thoughts written edition, talking about Barron's potential goalie interference in Pittsburgh. And then, of course, there was another instance of it. And then the Jets had another example when Connor Hellebuck had his, on the third goal where McKinnon's stick was close to Hellebuck's glove in that sort of situation. So Eric Comrie did not choose to engage. He said, that is not my area of expertise, not something I want to talk about. And then he had the line, just run the goalies over and score. I mean, it was pretty funny. I jokingly said the goalie union is not going to be happy with Eric Comrie for that. But, and then as you are right. So Daniel Bain of TSN fame was talking, asked him about the ping pong table, just just a fun question. And Eric went off for like a full 3 or 4 minutes talking about ping pong. And he basically said that Gus Nyquist, it's not even close how much better he is at ping pong. In fact, he said every sport. Now, of course, in a lot of our heads, it was like, what about hockey? What about hockey? The one he gets paid a lot of money to do. How come he's not the best at that? But he apparently is the best at golf, the best at ping pong, and the best of a number of other things. And I know it was funny because as Eric was talking, I thought to myself, oof, he's unintentionally creating quite a bit of humor for folks who are not very big fans of Gus Nyquist. But it was a pretty entertaining sort of segment. And he talked about how it's ruining his sleep patterns because now he wakes up at 2:30 in the morning wondering if he should try this move on Nyquist and not that move and stuff like that. So it was pretty entertaining, and it just goes to show what a personality Eric Comrie has.
No, absolutely. And you're obviously watching now on our YouTube channel, so just go to videos and click yesterday's video, I should say, with Eric Comrie and listen to it, because it is really funny, as Dave says. And obviously this is not a new thing, right? And Comrie talked about that when Gus Nyquist was a member of the Red Wings, he used to beat everybody. He even mentions that Gus Nyquist beats people with his offhand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was really funny. And, I think about this a lot when I'm listening to Comrie, either before a game or whenever he's interviewed. If there's one guy that, has a future in media, if he wants it, it's Eric Comrie, right? Like, he's a guy, and we've talked about this all the time, like goalies. There seems to be so many goalies that go into media after, right? Like, there's so many examples, like Marty Biron, we have on the show all the time, Mike McKenna, Darren Pang, who else am I? Andrew Raycroft. I mean, there's tons of guys. Carter Hutton. Like, there's really Chris Mason. I could go on and on and on, but there's tons of goalies that go into hockey media, sports media after.
Did you say Jamie McLennan?
I didn't mention Jamie McLennan. He's another guy, right? So I think that, it was just refreshing. It's just fun, right? Like, obviously, the season hasn't gone the way the Jets have wanted it to go. And the game tonight is obviously a huge game. And you can tell Eric Comrie, not only is he one of the more well-liked guys in the dressing room, he keeps things light, right? Like, you definitely know that, he is a positive influence on Connor Hellebuck, both on and off the ice, right? And that's something that I think we always talk about how players are robotic, right? And then there's someone like Eric Comrie or Gabe Vilardi who you listen to them and they keep you on your toes, right? You don't know what they're going to say next. Interesting about Comrie, though, is it kind of crossed my mind, Dave, does he get the start tonight? Right? Like, he's won 6 games in a row. He was asked about that as well. Again, you're on our YouTube channel, so don't turn us off now, but watch us live and then listen to the video of Comrie talking about just to watch the whole thing. But I think that there's a chance that he plays tonight. He's won 6 in a row, as I mentioned. He's playing well. I don't have, like, I'm not going to say I'm confident in saying that, but
Yeah.
if Hellebuyck plays tonight, Dave, I think you would agree that there's a good chance that Comrie plays against Chicago.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I mean, and that leads us into the discussion, right, Ezzy? Because Eric Comrie, as you said, he's won 6 straight games. He has a 943 save percentage in average over those 6 games. He's been phenomenal. And he had an interesting comment. He basically, Kelly Moore of 680 CJOB asked him about, is the game changed for him right now? Is something, I mean, obviously we know he changed the mask after the shellacking in Toronto. He went to the white cage.
It's all the mask, Dave. It's all the mask.
Yeah. But the question, was, are you seeing things differently? Is something changed? And he said, listen, like, quite honestly, we're just playing better defensively. And when teams play better defensively, what a shocker, it works out better for the goaltenders. So not a surprise there, but it does kind of lead me into the next question, Nez, that we were talking about Eric Comrie. Jets have 10 games left. I mean, of those 10, how many do you see realistically Eric Comrie getting into?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, we've talked about this on the show before, right, Dave? Like, if the Jets, or when the Jets are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, there's a chance that you'll see Dominic DiVincentis, I think, get a game, right?
Yeah.
So I think you have to factor that in as well. But I would assume that he's going to get at least 3, maybe 4 of these last 10 games. That would kind of be my best guess. Like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if Comrie starts tonight against Colorado. Not saying that Hellebuyck played bad on Thursday night or anything like that, but I just wouldn't be surprised based on how he's been playing. So, but I think, it kind of all depends on when the Jets get eliminated, because like we said, then you've got DiVincentis up, and then so that's going to kind of skew things a little bit. But I think something that needs to be talked about is like that how good of a season Comrie is having as a backup, right? And he's obviously a pending free agent. And I just don't see any reason why you wouldn't bring him back if he wants to come back, right? Like, he's been playing well. He has an excellent relationship with Hellebuyck. He has an excellent relationship with everybody in that room. Like, why wouldn't you bring him back? It seems like a no-brainer to me. So, yeah, he'll probably get 3 or 4 of the 10 starts, I imagine, Dave. Maybe 5. I think that might be a little bit too many. But I think the main point of this little mini segment here is that Comrie has had a fantastic season. Even though the Jets have had a disappointing season, you still got to look at the positives as far as I'm concerned. You got to look at Scheifele having a career year, right? You got to look at Morgan Barron having a career year. You got to look at Elias Salamonson emerging as a top 4 defenseman for the Jets. You got to look at Comrie having one of his best years as a pro goaltender, right? So he's definitely earned every single start. He will earn every single start that he gets for these last 10 games for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's reasonable to, I mean, it's hard to speculate because, like you said, Ezzy, we don't know what the plan is. Is the plan to get Dom DiVincentis his first NHL game? We don't know. But yeah, Comrie has shown that there's no reason to run Hellebuyck ragged at this point. And when Andrew Haleko asked to the Jets' percentage chance of making the playoffs, Money Puck currently has it at 4.3%. So you're telling me there's a chance? Yes, but is it a big chance? Not really. So, there's no reason to overburden Connor Hellebuyck at this point, and there's no reason not to give Eric Comrie some more starts and to kind of see how he's going to continue this run. And as he reminded us, it was a similar run to the one he was on last year at the end of the season. And look, ultimately, I don't care if you're the goaltender who wins the MVP and 3 Vezinas. If your defense isn't up to snuff, then it's going to be a problem. And the Jets defense, quite honestly, was not up to snuff defense as a 5-man unit, not just defenseman, Ezzy. And that is going to be an area of significant overhaul for this Jets club next year. But for right now, we're focusing on, of course, the Jets team of 25-26.
And on the topic of defense, I'll bring it up here because obviously he's a fan favorite of this show. And I think you know who I'm talking about, Dave. Ty Bauer. I think he was mentioned in Mike McIntyre's most recent article in the Free Press, right? Like, and I know that you're closer to him than I am, Dave. So you definitely know you're more on the inside than I am. But Scott Arniel himself, or no, was it Chevy mentioned? Chevy mentioned, Ty Bauer getting a look, right? He's played over 200 games in the AHL. And I think, to be honest with you, I don't know if there's been a player since Anthony Peluso that Jets fans want to see fight more in a Jets jersey than Ty Bauer. Obviously, they've seen him fight a lot in a Moose jersey. So just wanted to mention that as well. I think you'll get there's a good chance that you'll see Ty Bauer play on defense. As far as the defense goes, I think there's not going to be that many surprises, but also it's going to depend, like Nino and Nemesnikov, right? They're going to be back eventually. Like, does that mean that maybe, they want to get them some games, and that might mean that some other guys from the AHL won't get a game? Like, we've kind of gone over some names, like, does Colby Barlow get a game? Does Braden Yager get a game or two, right? 3 games, 4 games. I'm not sure, but it's definitely going to be an opportunity for the Jets coaching staff and development to watch some of these guys play here at the end of the season.
Well, speaking of play, we're going to speak to a guy who's the play-by-play voice of the Winnipeg Jets. His name is Dan Robertson, and he is joining us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Not bad. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing great.
Great.
We got no Drew. It means Ezzy and I are controlling the mics. We've got unfettered access to the mics. It's a wonderful way to start a Saturday.
I just like the way you segued. You said, great. We've got no Drew. You didn't miss a beat there.
Well, I try and keep it consistent and honest, Dan, and that's where we are on this show. So how you doing so far this Saturday?
Good. Woke up at, I'm all over the map. Woke up at like 5:45. I thought I don't need this, but that's the way it is. The travel gets to you after a while, I think. But no, it's great. It was like plus 12 in Denver yesterday, so I think the same today, and we'll go for a long walk. Not doing the game tonight, so that's kind of a bonus in a way at times. But yeah, it's always good to be here. I actually used to live here in the late 90s when I was first married, so it's always kind of cool to come back.
All right. Well, there you go. Denver's kind of like going home then, Dan. But, talking about the Winnipeg Jets, we know, of course, they came up short in that last game, and there's a lot of disappointment, but there still seems to be a belief in the room. What is kind of your sense, talking to the players, talking to the staff, in terms of 10 games left, but none of the teams ahead of them are really seizing it? And even though we know the chances are very unlikely, it seems like the belief is still there that they can do something.
Yeah, I spoke with Adam Lowry a few days ago. I can't quite remember where it was, but somewhere, the last stop we were in the last road trip. But he genuinely believed, and Adam's obviously an honest guy, but he said, we're not feeling pressure. We're feeling the excitement of having an opportunity. And, you could say that and not mean it, but I got the sense that he really meant it. I mean, they're not stupid. They look at the standings and they know that if it was just 5 points between them and the next highest team, then that's one thing. But to squeak past a couple of teams is another thing. So they know it's difficult. But I do believe they think that if they can get on a run, then they can do it. Now, how likely that is, I'm not sure. It's funny. It's kind of telling to me. I mean, these teams, the LAs and Seattles and Nashville and Winnipeg, none of them are great teams, right? If they were, they would grab a hold of it and get in there. But I think at least speaking with Adam that he believes it. So if your captain believes it, that's a good place to start.
Dan, before I ask my question, I have to give you absolute props on your Seattle Mariners hat. I absolutely love that hat, and it goes with the beginning of the baseball season, obviously, with the Jays getting their first win of the season. I'm going to stick to the Jays. I'm a fair weather Jays fan.
Yeah.
But how long have you been a Mariners fan?
Well, I'm not even a Mariners fan. Here's the story. When I grew up in Nova Scotia, and I was born in 1970. So I started to read a lot of sports books as quickly as I learned to read. My sister taught me at a fairly young age how to read. So I fell in love with that sort of thing. And so I used to get this thing called The Complete Handbook of Baseball, which was edited by a man named Xander Hollander. And every year, I mean, that was our internet back then. They had a little breakdown of every team. And I remember, so what the Mariners came in when the Jays did, right? So 77, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I see this logo, and I'm thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Now, I couldn't pick up my phone and order one on Amazon back in 1977, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I'd always wanted to get one. So when the Kraken came into the league, and I know I could have gotten one before then, but I was out for a walk in Seattle. There was a Seattle Mariners merchandise shop, and it had every logo of everything they ever had. I think they were thinking they were going to have to kick me out. I stood there for an hour, and I finally settled on the old classic. But yeah, so it's kind of a nod back to my childhood, I guess. I have a Padres one too, since they kind of went back to what they had back in the brown and the yellow. They've kind of reestablished that. So I'm a big logo guy, a big uniform guy. So this always kind of makes me happy in a way.
Nice. Well, it's a great hat, and
Thanks.
I love the Padres as well. I was always a big fan of Tony Gwynn when I was a kid. Obviously, one of the great hitters of the game. You mentioned, obviously, you're from Nova Scotia, and I wanted to actually ask you about another man who's the pride of Nova Scotia, Morgan Barron. Right, he takes the huge hit from Josh Manson in the corner, and then he gets right up and fights Josh Manson, and that's obviously 2 games in a row that the Jets have got into fights. Scheifele obviously got into the fight with Brett Howden after sticking up for his teammate Kyle Connor. But just how impressed were you with Morgan Barron? Obviously, we're hoping that he's going to be okay and he's going to be back on the ice sooner rather than later. But that was certainly a big show of bravery from the Jets forward.
It was. It's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? I mean, when it happened, I said Morgan's got to be careful here because, I mean, he's 6'4" and he's a strong guy, but he's not a fighter. He's not fought a lot. Manson, although he's not, Steve Durbano, you check that name from folks who don't know who that is. He can fight. So it's obviously great to see. It's great to see players picking up for each other, standing up for each other, like Scheifele did for Connor, or players standing up for themselves. The flip side of that is what happened when Radko Gudas hit Austin Matthews, and we know the follow-up out of that. Like, nobody bothered to go after Gudas. It's just, I guess, I know things happen quickly. I would rather have seen Morgan just kind of bear hug him or wrestle him to the ground, that sort of thing. And it's easy for me to say, but he took a pretty good knock or two there. And originally when he took the hit, that might have stunned him as well. But it's, this is so cliche. I don't even really want to say it, but in my time, this is my 4th year here. This seems to be as close a group of guys as there has been, certainly more than maybe the first year when I was here. But so I think that kind of permeates what they do as a team. And yeah, it was heartening to see him stand up for himself. I've heard people say, well, that's what happened. And I get it when they'll say we don't have tough guys anymore without Stanley or without Shen. But what if those guys were still here and they weren't on the ice? What were you going to do? So you wish the best for Morgan, and you appreciate just going up against a guy who's been down that road before.
Dan, sticking with that line, I'm going to ask you about Brad Lambert, because Brad Lambert, of course, is in his second go around. And one of the big things that Scott O'Neill talked about when he brought Lambert and Chibrikov and Ford up for that first run, I mean, not brought him up because there were a bunch of injuries, but kind of gave them that run early on in the season was so they'd be comfortable when they needed them in March or April, or if they needed them in March and April. And sure enough, Brad Lambert up with the Jets, and he knows that the runway is the entire regular season. He's not going to go back down to the Moose if he makes a mistake or come out of the lineup. They didn't even have enough forwards to bring him out of the lineup. So there's an assurance there. But he's played 11 games for the Jets during the second run. What have you seen from him so far as he continues to try and work his way into becoming an everyday NHLer?
I've seen I think the compete level go up in the sense that he's not just staying on the perimeter. And that one play, it showed us all a lot when he drove the nets against Vegas. I guess it was Lozon, and he knew that he was a big guy. But even though Brad's fairly light, he did what he had to do. He took it to the goal, and that took some nerves. So, and just talking with Scott O'Neill about the fact that you can get caught up in the numbers. Like, I'm not like you, Dave, and I appreciate the fact you see all the Moose games, as many as you can. All I do, I've been there a couple of times, but you look online and think, well, he's got whatever 6 goals. He's bombing, right? He's a bust. But like Arnie was saying, he's down there learning to play the game and understanding to play a team game, not just a Brad Lambert game. Mm-hmm. So that involves playing within a team concept, and he's 22, and it's funny, he's young, but you only get so many opportunities. And I think that's kind of in his head too. But what you said makes sense. He knows that if he makes a mistake, and he does, you see them out there, the turnovers, that sort of thing, like all young players do, but he's not going to get sent back to the Moose. So I think it's a pretty critical time for him, and it's a critical enough time too for the organization. They know they need an injection of youth and speed and cost certainty. I guess if he plays next year and makes the team, he's not going to make a whole lot of money, but if he can, be a top 6 guy, I don't know. We'll see. But I do like that. I like that he's taking hits to make plays. There is a certain fearlessness about his game. So I'm pretty fascinated to see where it goes down the stretch. I know myself just calling the games, I thought maybe at times I kind of push that narrative too much when he would get a goal or get an assist or do something well. I think you want to see him do well, and because you don't want to see anybody who's a good prospect not make it. So you hope for the best for him. But I've been pretty encouraged by what I've seen from him in the second go around.
Absolutely. And going from, one young player to another, Ilya Salomonson, we keep talking about him. And I know you and Kevin have been talking about him a lot on the broadcast, and rightfully so, right? Like at the beginning of the year, a lot of Jets fans were hoping that he could crack the top 6, but the way he's playing, Dan, I think I'm not going to say that you're going to agree with me, but I mean, he's shown that he could play a top pairing role, right? He's playing 18 minutes, 19 minutes, 21 minutes, sometimes 22 minutes a game. And not looking out of place, and Scott Arniel's relying on him for different situations. Like, I think for me, he's definitely shown that his ceiling is maybe higher than we originally thought.
So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but when Josh Morrissey came up, he was paired with Jacob Trouba. Is that right?
I think he actually might have been Byfuglien. Yeah.
It was Byfuglien.
It was Byfuglien to start, but he did play with Trouba as well.
Okay, so I know that Kevin had talked that when he played with Trouba, he just kind of concentrated on his defensive game, and he kind of eased his way in. And they're different players, right? Salomonson and Morrissey, but just to say that to me, he hasn't looked out of place, and that might not sound like a glowing compliment, but it really is. When you have to hit the ground running in the NHL and you're playing major minutes, he played so much with Sandberg and continues. You're out there against some really good players. So I like the fact there's a lot that I like about him. I like his footwork. I like his decision-making, whether that's, and not all the time. It's the same with Lambert. You're going to make mistakes, but he jumps into the play seemingly more often than not at the right time. He looks like an NHLer. He looks like a top 4 defenseman to me. And there's worse things if they elect when the new season starts next year, and depending who else they have. But if they have him with Morrissey, I mean, that obviously slots DeMello better. Pionk and Sandberg could play together in the second pairing, but just to stick to Salomonson, it's just there's a maturity about his game the last little while, and I'm sure you've seen it, Dave, right? I'm sure you've seen a gradual improvement over the last couple of years, but I've really been impressed, and I'm happy for him.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it, Dan. He's a very quiet, very soft-spoken young man, but he is a very good talent, and you could see it when he was on the Moose. I would talk to folks who were watching him, and they're like, this guy's going to be a very good player in the NHL for years to come. So, speaking of a guy who's been a very good NHL player and he's having a career year, Gabriel Vilardi. Now, he doesn't like to talk about himself. I mean, he is, we talked, Dan, before you joined us, we were talking about Eric Comrie's media availability yesterday. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but he was wacky. He was entertaining. And another guy who's pretty entertaining when he does media is Gabriel Vilardi. But focusing on his on the ice performance. I mean, he's played more games now than he's ever played in his career. He's on pace to have, to outdo his point. I think it's 62 last year's at 61 this year. So should eclipse those numbers. But just from his ability to drive that second line, which is a big thing for the Jets. What are you seeing from Gabriel Vilardi this season that's become such an important piece for this Jets team?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story at the end of this relating to one of his media appearances with me, and it's pretty good. But I'm more consistency. There's been times, and the numbers have been good in his first few years here, but there have been times where there's an 8-9 game gap, maybe where he has a goal and a couple of assists. And I think it weighs on him. He's pretty hard on himself, right? They all expect a lot from themselves, but some do it to the detriment themselves. Maybe Cole Perfetti is or was one of those players. But I see him maybe this year more than ever winning more board battles in the corners and along the boards in the offensive zone. I really appreciate that part of his game, right? He's he's got amazing hands. We know that, but he's just got a knack of whether it's kicking a puck and keeping it alive and pinning it along the boards of the stick and waiting for help, that sort of thing. But I think even at his age, and he's certainly not an old guy, but he's found a consistency in his game that's been pretty impressive. So he is the offensive kind of go-to guy on that line with Lowry and Perfetti. But it just, maybe I have to stop thinking along these lines, but I look at him so many times and think, what a great trade that was. I mean, it's just the deal that keeps on giving. So I think consistency is the big difference. And I don't think he'd mind me telling you this story. He did an intermission interview with me in one of our games I was hosting on the road. And, he said, I didn't like the Olympic break. I didn't like that sort of thing. And I thought, this is refreshing. This is great. But he's kind of looking around and he's not really looking at the camera. And I didn't really give it a second thought. So the next game, the next practice, actually, the next day, he says, Dan, and I thought, oh, what did I do? Did I ask him a bad question? He said, I'm sorry if I was rude. He said, it's hard for me to look into the camera. My mother called me and said that I need to start being more polite and looking into the camera when I talk to you. So I said, which is great. I said, listen, you were terrific. Don't worry about it. And I said, I know it's hard to look in the camera. It's hard for me right now to stare into a camera. We all know what that's like, but that sort of goes to show you a light moment between Gabe and I. But I love talking with him because he might say 3 words. Sometimes we all might feel like saying 3 words, but he doesn't care. He just says what he wants in a respectful way. I think he's refreshing to talk to.
Yeah, and Kevin talked to him. I forget if that was the Golden Knights game, Dan, or if that was the most recent game versus Colorado. But yeah, there's always a good in between Kevin and Gabe. And I wanted to ask you, sticking with Cole Perfetti, who obviously has been playing on that Velarde line, and I mentioned this to Dave. I wanted to talk about this on this morning's show. There's 10 games left, and obviously, the Jets are going to do their best to get into the playoffs, and they're going to try to win as many games as possible. And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but for these last 10 games, and these last 10 games are important for, I think you could argue, every single one of these players.
Yeah.
But is there one player that sticks out to you as maybe these games are the most important? Because for me, and I don't want to steal your answer, but that person for me would be Cole Perfetti, as I mentioned, just because he's in a contract year and he's not going to tell you that, I want to pad my stats as much as I can for these last 10 games. But clearly, I mean, it's going to help if he has a strong last 10 games in terms of the next contract he'll get.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that one, but I would go back to Brad Lambert to an extent. I don't think it's make or break what he does down the rest of the way, but he can give himself a leg up to a roster spot next year if he plays well. I think with Cole, we've talked about it a lot, that high ankle sprain, and it took him a lot to come back from. There's spurts there where you think, okay, this guy's driving things tonight, and he's very much a factor. The consistency for me isn't quite there yet. So, but you wonder about the whole contract thing and how much that's weighing on his mind. We know what we're going to get with Connor and Scheifele, even if you look to next year, and regardless who's on the line with them. But and we know once Ehlers left, to me, it kind of fell on Perfetti's shoulders a lot to pick up the slack offensively and to develop. Like, what is he? I guess he's 24 now. He turned 24 on New Year's Day. Like the clock's not ticking, but they need him to be at his best. So yeah, it's I guess the other hand is if he in the next 10 games he gets 2 points, I don't know how that will affect him, but it's pivotal enough, right? You want to see him kind of get to be the guy that they hoped he would be when they took him in the first round a number of years ago.
This is Dan Robertson, play-by-play voice of the Winnipeg Jets on TSN, joining us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. And Dan, I'm going to go from a player who's producing but not producing a ton of points to a player who is producing a ton of points and dropping the gloves and fighting. He's doing it all these days. Mark Scheifele's got more Gordie Howe hat tricks than Gordie Howe had himself. But from your perspective, watching, as you said, for the last 4 years, watching Mark Scheifele grow and continue to evolve and develop his game. And we know how disappointing this year has been, or even last year, given the fact that he wanted to be on the Four Nations, didn't get selected, wanted to be on the Olympic team, doesn't get selected. It would be natural for a guy to kind of sag a little bit because we knew that he is trying to showcase. And again, I wouldn't say that he was showboating. He wasn't trying to be an individual. Look at me, Team Canada. But I think he was saying, I'm going to let my kind of performance speak for itself on the ice. And we know we haven't seen that drop, I should say, from the Olympic break to now. He's on pace to become the first 100-point player for the Jets 2.0. Just from your perspective, watching him throughout the course of the season, but specifically after the Olympic break, what have you seen from him?
I was wrong. After the Olympics, I thought he would sag. I thought that now I don't know if people will say, well, is he playing with a chip on his shoulder? I don't know if that's the case either. I just think the guy is so driven to be the best he can be. And again, I know that's cliche, but it's Mark in a league full of overachievers. I mean, he's right there. And that's not to discount the amazing talent he has. He seems to be so dialed in and looks after himself and just so hungry on a night by night basis. And it's, not just individual things that he's worried about. He's trying to drive this team back into the playoffs. And Here's something that bothers me. There'll be times, and I get it, where people will maybe rip he and Kyle Connor, and I guess I can lump them together for this. They'll say, well, they weren't very good defensively tonight. And I always think there's a lot of other guys who can be good defensively. There's no, who other on that team can put 40 goals in and do what they do. So cut them some slack. Last weekend in Pittsburgh, Boston on Thursday and Pittsburgh on Saturday, I didn't think he played very well. But then whenever he doesn't for a couple of games or when he's a non-factor, the consistency factor kicks in again. And you know that he's going to come back with a big performance, which he did against the Rangers, even though he didn't have anything statistically to show for it. And then the couple of games at home, he was terrific. So I admire his dedication and his single-mindedness, I guess, if I can say that, to staying excellent. And it's, he's 32. Again, he's a young man, but he's statistically, and you guys have probably watched, well, you watched him closer than I have over the last dozen years, but I think two-way, he's getting better too. So it's kind of neat to see somebody improve in their early 30s rather than decline in their early 30s or in their mid-50s when you really start to decline as a broadcaster.
No, you're like a fine wine, Dan.
Yeah.
You're only getting better. Speaking of players that have been consistent, I know he's only in his second full NHL season, but I keep talking about Cole Koepke, and I know you and Kevin have been talking about him a lot, on the broadcast. And, his points don't necessarily jump out at you, right? Like, I think he's got 14 or 15 points, but like, to me, he just seems like a guy that he is going to factor into the Jets' plans in the future, because he's a guy that, you can put him on the third line, you can put him on fourth line, he can kill penalties, he's got the physicality. Like, he's just really continues to impress me, and a guy that I hope that turns into like maybe even a 2-year contract for him.
I hope so too. I think he's earned it. And I guess the flip side of that, if he doesn't get something like that, and maybe it's his choice, but you'd have to ask why. Like, why would they not want to sign him? He's a coach's dream in the sense that I don't think you have to tell him much, and you know exactly what you're going to get from him. It's straight line speed, and you're right. And I know you weren't criticizing, because we do talk about him a lot, because it's good to see someone that you can count on. Not to say you can't count on others, but he's a known quantity. I mean, he's really fast. There was a play on the road trip, and I get my games mixed up, where he back checked, he lifted a guy's stick. I think it was, or maybe it was the Vegas game. No, it was the Vegas game, and he went down the left wing and cut behind the net and set somebody up in front where it just didn't work out. But he's a guy who, I think he had 10 goals last year with the Bruins, and he's another one of those guys. I talked about looking at Brad Lambert's stats in the AHL and thinking he might be having a down year, and you maybe look at Koepke and think, well, if you've never seen him play, he's like, well, whatever, an average player. And there's something impressive there. He's just, defensemen have to be aware when he's coming. You can't have a bad gap or he'll blow right by you. He's not an elite finisher by any sense, but if you could pencil him in for a couple of years, I think that would make a heck of a lot of sense, because, as I said, you know what he's going to bring, and I'm just really impressed by him. And he's a bright kid too. Like, there's some players you like to interview more than others, and he's one of them. Like, he's soft spoken, but very, very bright and well thought. So it's always nice to chat with him, whether it's on camera or off.
And then one player who, he's signed that big 6-year extension with the Winnipeg Jets, and you knew that he was looking to kind of, a lot of guys want to show that it was earned, but Neil Pionk obviously, dealt with a lot of injury this year, which took him out. He's only played 44 games. From your perspective, he's a guy that's extraordinarily well liked, we know, in that dressing room, but just how disappointing do you think it's been for him to kind of have the season that he's had, given kind of the weight of expectation of being that second pairing right side guy alongside Dylan Samberg?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if Neil would call it, or if I should call it, a lost season, but I almost get that sense that it's been that way. And, with respect to him, there's been a lot of Jets, we know, part of the problem this year is that their numbers, apart from a few guys, have really cratered. And Neil's one of them. I mean, if you look at him, I think the previous 4 or 5 years, he had at least 30, 35 points. And so even before he got hurt, the production just wasn't there. So, you wonder why. And then he got hurt, as we know, and then got hurt again, a new injury or whatever it was. So it's kind of been, as it has for, the Nemesnikovs and Niederreiters and those kind of guys, it's been a, not a write-off, but pretty close. So I'm glad he's been able to get back. I mean, I know they miss his bite and his competitiveness. I mean, he's always kind of played over his head, I think, in a way, and I mean that as a compliment. So, I don't know if those things have weighed on him. He's just one of those guys, like with Lowry, who you hope that he's able to get a good offseason of training in, and Neil can start fresh in the fall. He should be much better, and they need for him to be much better. And it's, as we talked about earlier with Salamonson, if he's able to play in the top, the top two pairings, then that would, put Neil in a good spot and put Dylan DeMello in the right spot too. And their right side might be okay going into the new season. I keep saying the new season. I know we're not done with this one yet. Yeah.
It's crazy though. We're getting close to the end of the season. 10 games left, right? Like it's kind of hard to believe. Just a few more questions for you, Dan. You mentioned earlier it's a Sportsnet game tonight. You guys obviously have the off day, but you guys will be back on March 31st, which is a Tuesday at United Center when the Jets play the Hawks. So you mentioned you might go for a walk, but what about your partner Kevin Sawyer and yourself? Like, what's today? Like, are you guys going to spend like the whole day together? Is there going to be where are you guys going to watch the game tonight? Like, we want to know. Like, take us behind the scenes when you guys have a day off and the Jets are playing. Like, what does it look like for you guys in Colorado there?
Well, I have to give Kevin a lot more credit than I deserve. What he's like, he likes to keep his cup filled. He wants to get as much out of it as he can. So I've seen him. I know we've been here before in Denver. And it was a night before game. He's like, "Do you want to go to Red Rocks to a concert?" Which is a great outdoor venue if folks don't know about it. And it's a fair bit of a drive. And I said, "No, I don't want to go to a concert." "Who is it?" He's like, "I don't know. I just want to go. I want to get outside." I said, "No, I'm going to stay in and just do my homework." So he gets his homework done, his research done, and he gets out and runs around too in the best possible way. So it's one thing that happens. There's 3 buses that go to the game. There's an early bus, a little bit later bus, and then shortly before the game, there's a bus for staff and scratch players. So we're on that one. We get there about a half an hour before the game and just have the media meal and sit and watch. So we don't spend a whole lot of time on the road when we have free time together. I think it's because we sit beside each other all the time. It's like we're a married couple almost in a sense. So, but I give him credit, man. He squeezes all the juice out of that orange. So he lives it the right way. And then there's me in this hotel room. So that's the flip side of it. But I managed to have my fun too.
Dan, you're doing this show. I mean, that's just as important as anything else that could be done right now.
That's why I woke so early. I was nervous. I wanted to make sure my hat was on straight and all of that stuff.
We appreciate you waking up early, Dan.
It wasn't. I was already up. I'm joking.
Dan, just, I want to talk about the impact of history because, there's so much discussion points. Jets 1.0, Jets 2.0, Atlanta / Jets, Jets 2.0 loan, whatever is your cup of coffee, if you will. You can, I always allow people to have it however they want. But one thing that's indisputable is that Mark Scheifele hit the most games ever in a Jets jersey. And I guess I probably could have paired this with my question about Mark Scheifele, but it is probably a separate standalone. Yeah. Just how important do you think that is for him as a guy who is most likely going to be the guy at the top of the record books in every statistical category that there is? And I know his big thing is catching Dale Howardchuck, but becoming the guy who's worn a Winnipeg Jets jersey more than any other player in the 1.0 or 2.0 history is pretty significant. So what kind of do you think that history means to him and to the organization?
I think it's really cool. I mean, he's Mr. Winnipeg Jet, and there are guys who you can identify whatever iteration you want to go with the Jets. Even go back to the WHA, right? With Bobby Hull. I know that's way back in a different kettle of fish, but I think that's probably part. Well, maybe I'll get a chance to talk to them sometime about it. But the Steve Yzerman was his favorite player, right? As a kid, and he appreciated that he played for the only one organization. We know that story, but I think that's part of kind of what drives him. He's got that standard for excellence. And I don't know if I said this on the air the other day or maybe just in conversation, but I hope people appreciate what the Jets have right now and what fans get to watch. I know they've had a terrible year, but if you look at it, they've got an elite goal scorer in Kyle Connor, who's been here a long time. He should be here a lot longer. I've seen the flip side when you don't have a number one goaltender locked in for years. I saw that in Montreal. Once Carey Price went, people were like, "Where's Carey Price? We miss him." I'm like, "Yeah, well, remember that now, right?" With Connor Hellebuck, you've got Morrissey, who's a franchise defenseman, and right at or near the top of the heap is Mark Scheifele. So those are 4 cornerstone players that have a lot in common, and you can put Adam Lowry in there too, obviously not from a production standpoint, point-wise, but from a leadership and an excellent play angle too. So, yeah, I think I think just it's a neat time in the history of the organization, whatever way you want to see the organization. But I think that's why too, that management knows and certainly hopes that this is just a down year and kind of an outlier, and they can reload and make some clever plays, and maybe it'll take a big trade or something to inject some life into the team. But they have those 4 building blocks, and it's I think if you're a Jets fan, you should appreciate what you have to watch on a nightly basis that way.
Well, we appreciate having you to watch almost on a nightly basis. Not tonight, but we'll be watching you on Tuesday when the Jets take on the Hawks. So, Dan, thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Have a good show, boys. See you later.
All right.
Thanks,
There
Dan.
he goes. Dan Robertson, play-by-play voice of those Winnipeg Jets. All right, Ezzy, that was a great conversation with Dan. He's going to get his day started in Colorado. We've still got plenty of hockey talk to go because we've only gotten through 1 hour of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We still have 1 hour to go. So we're going to head to break. Make sure you're smashing that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. And, maybe bring some questions for Ezzy and I in the next segment. But for now, we're going to hear from our sponsors.
I want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now, you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre.
Boys, I've made an important life decision, and I need your support.
Oh, boy.
I've decided to get a grill.
You mean a barbecue grill for cooking? Like, that's not an important life decision, Ezzy.
No. A grill for my teeth.
A grill for your teeth? Do I even want to know why you're doing this?
It's simple, really. Every time I go to Holt Dental, I get treated so very well by Dr. John and his team that I need to keep finding additional reasons to go back. I rely on Holt Dental for all of my dental needs, and they do it all, from regular cleanings to cosmetic dentistry. Plus, they have free parking at their front door, and you know how much I love my convenient parking.
For all your dental needs, Illegal Curve recommends Holt Dental, conveniently located on Taylor Avenue near Grant Park Mall. For more information, visit them online at holtdental.ca. For over 40 years, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has been Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy. Renowned in the comedy world as a must-play venue, Rumors has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers, wedding socials, and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase show tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey Winnipeg, Joe Carter here. I look forward to joining you in Winnipeg on June 4th for the Ray D. JCC Ken Cronson Sports Dinner. See you in June. Don't be late.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Ezzy Ginsberg. We were just joined by Dan Robertson, play-by-play voice of the Winnipeg Jets, bringing that East Coast Canada flavor to our Central Canadian program, Ezzy. Although he's
been out to the Maritimes, Dave?
Only landed there. I've never actually. The farthest east I've gone is Quebec City. I think.
Me too. Yeah, I've been to Quebec. I've been to Montreal tons of times, but I've been when I was 14 or 15. We took a family trip. My dad and my sister and I took a trip out, and we went to Quebec City. And then we went to, if you heard of Tadoussac, Quebec, we went there as well and did some whale watching.
Wow.
Which was very nice. But no, I've never been to the Maritimes. Halifax, Nova Scotia, definitely. I want to visit all the Maritime provinces. But haven't had an opportunity. I'd love to take my kids and do kind of like a road trip to the Maritime provinces. But obviously Dan Robertson and Morgan Barron, two of our favorite Maritimers for sure, right?
Absolutely. So there's Eastern Canada, the Atlantic Canada is where it's at. We'd love to go and check that out. I've spent more time in Western Canada. I'm more of a Western Canadian kid, right?
I like to say central. I like to say in the central time zone.
Well,
Manitoba, North Dakota, Minnesota, Saskatchewan.
Well, Comet's been to Tadoussac and saw whales there as well.
Nice. Yeah, I believe they're called minke whales, if I'm not mistaken.
Look at you. A minke. I'm a Manuki, but you're a minke.
I saw a minke. Drew Mandell's a dinky, but I went to go see minkies.
Well, Drew Mandell isn't with us right now because he's currently in the hospital getting treated for gout after eating 17 pounds of steak. And let me tell you, if you didn't, I've had people.
Dave, his name used to be the Meat Man. Now it's the Gout Master.
But I can tell you the amount of people who have messaged me about, Drew and this meat thing. And all I care about is that my boy Colby Spence gets a couple of steaks courtesy of his amazing videography / editing skills. But
that's the least Mandel could do. I mean, he's got $500 or I think he's got some cheese.
501.17.
Yeah, he's got over $400 worth of meat. He could throw Colby a steak. That's the least he could do. He should be throwing us a steak too, Dave.
Exactly. But anyways, let's keep the meaty talk going on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, which is of course brought to you by our friends at Play Now. And as you know, one of the things that you asked Dan about it, and I think it's a good question. And the reason I think it's a good question is not because it's my question, but actually it's yours, is the final 10 games. I think, we want to hear from you in the chat. So many of you, and we appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with us. Don't forget, we will be live after the Jets and Avs game this evening, which starts at 6:00. So we'll be around 8:40 p.m. Central. We'll be back here on the Illegal Curve post-game show. We believe Drew will be joining us from wherever he is, now that he's sold his $500 of meat and he's bought a plane ticket wherever he's flown off to. We'll hopefully be hearing from Drew as well. But there are 10 games left. And the question I will pose to you, even though you asked me the question originally, but I'm going to pose it to you as if it's somehow my question, is what player is the final 10 games of this regular season? Who is it most important for? I mean, there's, again, like we talked about, there's contract reasons. There's just wanting to kind of remove the stank of the previous however many games they've played. So from your perspective, who are these last 10 games most important for?
Yeah, and if you were listening to the whole show, especially last segment specifically, I gave my answer to Dan Robertson. And for me, it's Cole Perfetti. And, before I talk about Perfetti, I mean, Brad Lambert is definitely a guy that I think these last 10 games are important for. I think there's other players like, I think you would throw Isaac Rosen in there, Dave. A guy
don't name everybody.
No. I'm just saying, like, I think there are other options that
yeah, of course.
And we'll get, and we want you to chime in on the chat. Who are these last 10 games the most important for? And, some people might say, that's a ridiculous question. They're important for all these guys, but obviously like Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Gabe Velarde, Morrissey, Lowry, these guys are under contract for many years. These are the core of the team. So obviously we're not talking about those guys, but so specifically when it comes to Perfetti, I think it's all about the fact that he's up for a contract. Mm-hmm. And I think before the season started, I know a lot of people thought it would be a no-brainer that the Jets would sign Perfetti to a long-term contract, whether that was, 5, 6, 7, or maybe even 8 years. Or sorry, 7 is the maximum now, right, Dave? I believe under the new CBA.
Yeah.
So 7 years. Sorry, I was thinking about the old days when you used to be able to sign your own players to 8 years. But the point is, Perfetti misses the time. He misses, I think it was 14 games with the ankle sprain. So that will have to be factored in. And I forget who Cole Perfetti's agent is, but he's obviously going to mention that during.
What's his name?
Overhart?
Yeah, it's Kurt Overhart.
Kurt Overhart. Oh, Mr. Hardliner.
Kurt Overcharge.
Yeah, Overcharge. Yeah, it's a nickname that's definitely been earned. He's a successful player agent. So he's making a lot more money than I am, Dave. So I can't really fault him. But I think Kurt Overhart's definitely going to mention that into his analysis. Like you have to factor that in, right? Like this is not a regular season. A high ankle sprain is a serious injury. Not only did he miss 14 games, but it affected him when he came back, right? We talked about it. It took Perfetti, a good solid 15, 20 games to get going. But for me, it has to be him because, he's sitting at 29 points, 10 goals, 29 points in 58 games. And regardless of what you want to say, at the end of the day, his point totals are going to have a huge factor in what amount of money he's going to get, right? So I just think it's a bigger conversation to me, and we've talked about it a little bit this year, not necessarily recently, but Perfetti's a guy that, you have to think right now the best bet is that it's going to be a shorter term contract, right? Like stranger things have happened. Like, he could still get a long-term contract, Dave, but if you ask me, I'm kind of looking at it and thinking like maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years, as opposed to like 6 or 7 years at the beginning of the season. But for me, I don't think Perfetti has something to prove necessarily, but I think he just wants to finish strong. And he's got points in his last 3 games, right? And he's been really good. I think like we know that this second line, Lowry is not your future second line center, but for now, Lowry, Velarde, and Perfetti have been pretty good together, right, Dave? So I just think that it's an interesting conversation. And these last 10 games, like it'll be interesting to see, how many points Perfetti is going to be able to rack up, just because of, like I said, the fact that he's due for a contract, and we're not really sure what that contract is going to look like. Like, people in the chat are chiming in, and I would imagine most people think he's going to get a shorter term contract, but I think, one thing's for sure, he's definitely improved his play. Like earlier in the season, like we talked about, when he came back from that injury, he was struggling to produce any offense, let alone goals and assists. Like he just wasn't producing a lot of offense out there. So for me, it's got to be Cole Perfetti, but I think Brad Lambert would be an acceptable number 2 for me, Dave.
Well, that leads perfectly into my number 2, Ezzy, because that is exactly where I would go. I agree with your assessment in terms of Cole Perfetti. I think there's definitely things that, this was supposed to be the reason why they did the short-term deal, right? The 2-year deal that they signed last season was supposed to be because, hey, you're going to get a chance to kind of show what you can do. And without Nikolai Ehlers driving that second line, we've seen that they don't have the same cachet, if you will, that and he obviously the high ankle sprain for sure. So that, I think you're absolutely right. I think Cole Perfetti has a lot to prove. I don't know that, like you indicated, we've seen improvement from him. There's no question that his play is stronger, his skating is stronger. He is a lot less hesitant, which is what we saw from him with the high ankle sprain. Even when he kind of came back initially, you could see there was still some hesitation in his game. But to me, it's all about Brad Lambert. And the reason I say that is because he's just got a golden opportunity in front of him. And he's got to be able to show that he can be an everyday NHLer, because that's what he declared himself to be, right? I mean, the person who put the pressure on his shoulders wasn't the organization. It was Brad Lambert. Brad Lambert basically said, I should be an NHLer, which is, again, look, and I will tell you this, and this is not a surprise to anyone who, listens to our show or pays attention or just knows how guys in hockey are. Every single guy in the AHL thinks that they should be an NHLer. They do. They all do. You talk to them, every guy thinks that, even the guys on AHL contracts think that they could be in the NHL. So the fact of the matter is, it's not a surprise, but from Lambert's perspective, it was the more difficult element of understanding. And I agree with Dan that it wasn't about scoring so much. It was about his play away from the puck and what he was able to do when he didn't have the puck, or how he could retrieve the puck and those sorts of things. But for me, it becomes a function of like, here's your shot. You've played 11 games in this last little go around. You came up for 4. Now you've played 11 straight. You're going to play the remaining 10. So you're going to get a 21 game sample. And what you have to do is you have to show that you are enough of a player to merit a spot in the NHL. And it can't just be that you have a spot and you're not producing, because your role as Brad Lambert is to be a producer. You're not there to be a checker. You're not there to not produce. You have to be able to score. Now, you scored in your first year as a pro, 21 goals. But you didn't score a lot last year. You didn't score a lot this year. And, I think he's got 2 goals and 5 assists, maybe 2 goals, 3 assists, in 15 games. So it's okay, but he needs to do more. So for me, Brad Lambert is the guy who, again, he's showing well and he's improving, and he's not getting a ton of minutes, right? That's the other thing that we'll note. It's one thing that we'd like to see more of, and is that he gets a little more time, because at this point, organizationally, and I was suggesting this 2 months ago, I was saying, look, for the final 20 games of the season, you want to give these guys the trial by fire. You want to give them all the minutes, as you want to give them all the opportunity to say, yes, we're capable of handling this, or we're not. But if you're not, great. You know that for next year that Brad Lambert is going to go here in the organizational depth chart, not there. And I think, that's what you have to determine, to me at least, in these final 10 games.
Absolutely. And, we talked about it, the game against Vegas, he only had just under 9 minutes of ice time. He was up around 11 minutes of ice time against Colorado. But prior to that, he was getting, just looking here, Dave, 13 minutes and 4 seconds against the Rangers, 13 minutes and 45 seconds against Pittsburgh. Going back to that Boston game, 12 minutes and 16 seconds. So I think his ice time, it'll be interesting to see, going forward these last 10 games, how much ice time Arniel and the coaching staff give him. And also, does he get an opportunity playing with Mark Scheifele on the top line, right? Like, let's not, kind of pussyfoot around this year. Like, that's who we're talking about. We want him to be playing with impactful players, or, playing up with Lowry and Velarde, right? Like in a top 6 role, maybe getting 15, 16, 17 minutes of ice time, right? He's obviously already been given second power play opportunity, but that's what I want to see here. At one point, do the Jets give him that elevated role? I don't necessarily think it'll be tonight. I mean, we're expecting the line to be one of Danny Jilkin or Parker Ford with Isaac Rosen and Brad Lambert, right, Dave? That's kind of what we're expecting. But, with 4 games left, 5 games left, 6 games left, depending on if the Jets are mathematically eliminated at that point, does Lambert receive those top 6 minutes? I think it would be a shocker if he isn't, right, Dave? Because at that point, why wouldn't you give him that opportunity? And I think you make a really good point when you talk about that idea of him not having to worry about getting called down to the AHL. Like Chevy and Arniel, they made it clear after the trade deadline that Brad Lambert was sticking up with the Jets and he was getting an opportunity. It wasn't 1 game here, 2 games here, 3 games here. It was a permanent opportunity. And I think that has definitely helped him. And, we saw it, and Dan Robertson talked about it when we had him on just, shortly, 20 or 30 minutes ago, that net drive against Vegas, like, he's got to do more of that, right? Like, he's got to get inside, right? Like, it's one thing to use your speed along the wings, but like, you gotta go to the net, and like you said, he's got to produce, right? Like they want to see Brad Lambert is like, he's not a defensive forward. That's not Brad Lambert's game. Obviously, his defensive game has improved, Dave. Yeah, but he's got to prove, just like Isaac Rosen, right? Like I realize, like, people are divided on Rosen, and I think he's only got, what does he have? The 1 goal. 1 goal in 11 games. 11 games. Oh, it's already been 11 games. I was going to say 8 games. Yeah. But yeah, it's already been 11. I mean, the reality is, Dave, when you play these back-to-back games on the weekend, these games quickly add up, right? So I think Rosen has a lot to prove, and he's got to produce too. And like, not to say that, these guys, if they don't produce, won't have a role on this team, but there's other players that are going to get a look as well, right? Like we've talked about it, the Colby Barlows, the Braden Yagers. I'm not saying that those guys are going to be top 6 forwards for the Jets, but there's other guys in the system that the Jets potentially see as guys that could fit on, whether that's a top 6 role, a middle 6 role, whatever. So Brad Lambert does have a lot to prove, and I think he's definitely shown a lot better in the second half of the season than he did when he was previously up, and he only got a few games, right? I think you could say, there were flashes, but that's what Lambert's got to do. He's got, and it's boring, and Dan Robertson talked about it, but he's got to be consistent. He's got to make sure that, he's doing all of those right things when he doesn't have the puck, making sure he's in position, make sure he's making the right reads, backtracking, all of that stuff, right? So he's definitely going to be a player that, we're going to be watching closely. Jets fans are going to be watching closely. I'll throw in one other guy here, Dave, as part of this segment, Johnny Taves, right? Like, Johnny Taves is a guy, it's kind of been, I wouldn't say forgotten, but hasn't been talked about as much here. But he's a guy that we've wondered, like, is he a guy that you bring back on another 1-year contract? And honestly, my answer has been yes, but it has to be clear that, he's a 4th-line center, right? Like, there's no, maybe he can emerge and maybe he can play in the top 6. Like, I think that ship has sailed for Jonathan Taves at 37 years old. Yeah. So that's another guy that I would want to see, like, how he finishes the season. Not to say that, he's got to score 3 or 4 goals in the last 10 games or 5 goals in the last 10 games, Dave. That's not what I'm saying, but I think it'll be an interesting player to watch because of the uncertainty. Like, is this his last year in the NHL? Is he going to play on another team next year? right? Like, I don't think anybody knows. I really don't, Dave. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's kind of a little bit of uncertainty in terms of Jonathan Toews' future here. I think I would, if you were to ask me, like what are the chances? I think the chances are good that he's going to come back, but I can't say that with any degree of certainty.
And I think it's fascinating because if you listen to the chat is very evenly divided. We've got some folks who are like, he's fine. You bring him back as, like you said, look, Scott Arniel didn't do himself any favors in the summer when he said, when at the Toews introductory presser said, oh no, Jonathan said he's happy to become, you're not going to be a fourth line center. He said he was happy to be a fourth line center. It was like, well, you haven't even seen him skate. How can you say what he's going to be? So, he pigeonholed himself a little bit. And I think he tried to prove that he was right. And I think the only thing he did was he probably did himself and Toews a disservice because, I mean, look, Toews played all the games. That's impressive for a guy who missed 2.5 years. But I just think it'll be interesting to see how, to be honest with you, my thought is that he does, look, if he wanted to go somewhere else, says he, to a new team, then it would have been done. He would have gone at the trade deadline because there would have been a team or two that would have picked him up. So I think it's a function of it's like Winnipeg or bust at this point. It would be my guess for Jonathan Toews for next year. And yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a mixed bag. I mean, he's got, what does he have? 9 goals and 7 assists, I think, or no, 9 goals.
Yeah, we've got it right up there. 24 points in 72 games from Guga Hala. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
good name.
So I mean, and look, and only in the peg says 65% in the faceoff circle. That's huge. So I mean, it's a very interesting. Like Toews is a very polarizing subject because you either get some who say yes, do it, and there's others who say no because he doesn't fit the game anymore. The game has passed him by. So I think that it is definitely going to be a subject of conversation. It'll be something we'll, again, unless he addresses it in his final media availability, will be a subject of conversation and speculation.
And yes, it has been a disappointing season. There's no way to really sugarcoat that, Dave.
Yeah.
But if Toews does decide to retire, he's still a Hall of Famer. It's not like, I don't think that, this year, look, I think the Jets, there was a risk. They gambled on Jonathan Toews and it didn't work out. That's the way I look at it, right? Like they were hoping that he could play second line center. They gave him all the opportunities, right? And he's just not able to do that at this stage of his career. So I don't think anybody is, looking down on Toews or anything like that. Like he has given an honest effort. Like we talked about, he's certainly, winning a lot of faceoffs for the Jets. He's still scored some goals. Like 24 points in 72 games isn't anything to necessarily write home about, but it's still 24 points, right? So yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see if he stays with the Jets or he hangs them up.
Well, look, I mean, if he's cooked, he's got more goals than Nino Niederreiter, Adam Lowry, who's only played 12 more games than, Cole Koepke, Vladimir Mesnikov, Gus Nyquist. That's not hard. I'm pretty sure Ezzy has more goals than Gus Nyquist. Isak Rosean, Brad Lambert, scored a lot more than those guys. Now, you would say that conversely, you'd give him the fact that he's been given a lot more opportunity, a lot of second line minutes. And again, it's an interesting conversation. I think it's one we'll be having with folks until it's exactly known what his plan is, whether he will come back or not. But, the comment from T. Will is 1,000% right. It just went up, but the fact is that giving him a games played bonus as opposed to a performance bonus was crazy from the like sometimes the coaching staff, I mean, the brain trust, if you will, the Cheveldayoff and company, they get some things right. Every once in a while, though, they get big, look at the big brain on Brad and they try and overthink things. One example of that is the Kovacevic 3-year deal, thinking by giving him a 3rd year at $1 million, it's like a poison pill. A team's not going to take him. Well, the Montreal Canadiens proved that to be wrong when they picked him up off waivers. And similarly, the Jonathan Toews per games played, because then the problem is if you wanted to, I mean, we saw the benefit for him after the Olympic break, right? When there's been breaks, he's been better because his body's had time to kind of like rest up and then get ready. Because what a hard season for him to come back in, right? A condensed schedule as opposed to one which is got a little bit more of a, 3-4 games a week as opposed to 4 or 5 games a week. So the games played contract, because what it does is if Scott Arniel says, well, I'm going to sit you, well, guess what? You just cost him money. And it becomes potentially acrimonious. So
the contract made it basically impossible to healthy scratch him.
Yeah.
Forget the fact that he's a future Hall of Famer, which means that he's just treated differently. You can like it or not, but you know this, Dave. He's treated differently when you're Jonathan Toews and you have all of the resume that he has. It's not a guy that you healthy scratch and it's an easy decision, right? Forget the fact that it's in his contract that he gets paid the more games he plays, right? And another thing I wanted to mention on the Jonathan Toews conversation is I think you have to think that the Jets organization is asking themselves, like, do we have a player that's currently in the organization that can fill that fourth line center role, as opposed to, or in addition to, that might be a player that, the Jets think that they can acquire on the free agent market. Like, I haven't looked at the list of upcoming free agents for this summer, Dave. So I can't tell you like one or two players that the Jets would target. That's obviously the pro scouting staff works with Chevy on that. But I think that has to be factored in. Like, can Parker Ford play that role next year? And I'm being serious. Can Parker Ford play that role for you next year? Can Danny Zhilkin play that role for you next year? Because I think right now it's pretty clear who the Jets are going to be lining up the middle. Scheifele is going to be your first line center, as always. Adam Lowry, we've talked about, he can't be the answer at second line center. We think that the Jets are going to try to acquire a second line center. At least for me, that's should be the biggest priority for Chevy is figuring out that 2C. So that's the other thing. Like, is it not like, I think people look at it like, well, if Toews wants to come back, he'll come back. I don't necessarily know if it's that easy, Dave.
Well, and I saw the comment and I've lost it, but basically it was, one of these, I think it was from Dave, but the idea being you don't want to block guys. You don't want to create impediments needlessly with the veterans. I mean, look, we've seen this organization do that, right? When they traded for Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt, created a logjam at D, and you lost and you're protecting Stanley, and you lost Kovacevic, and you lost Chisholm, and you lost.
Well, we've seen it with Sami Niku. We've seen it with Ville Heinola. We've seen it with, like you said, Kovacevic, Chisholm.
Yeah. So I mean, there are problems when you look at, similarly, Gus Nyquist. You wasted $3 million on a player and again, easy to say in hindsight. I mean, a lot of people didn't love the move based on his down year last year.
Well, hold on a second though, Dave. I don't know if you've wasted that $3 million because it's elevated all the other Jets players' ping pong game.
That is a very good point. I'm sorry, Ezzy. That is a very good point. That is, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I kind of got a hankering to play a little ping pong with the Jets yesterday after we finished media. I'm like, let's go. I'm in. Put me into the game.
This is an opportunity for me to give, Josh, my buddy Josh Team. This is an opportunity to give him a shout out because in high school, Dave, I don't know if I've ever told you this. I think it was grade 11, maybe grade 10. We actually had a ping pong league in my buddy Josh Team's basement in River Heights.
Okay.
And I definitely was not one of the better players. I remember Steven Dubiensky, shout out to him. He was a really good tennis player and he was a really good ping pong player. But yes, we had a high school ping pong league happening in Josh Team's basement, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm with you. When Eric Comrie was talking about the ping pong, I was like, maybe Dave and I should bust out a little. I don't know if you have do you have a ping pong table at your house, Dave?
I don't. I don't
either.
Not. But
I have Uno. We can play Uno.
Yeah, I've got lots of deck of cards. We can play some various card games. There's no question about that.
A little backgammon.
Hey, we're multifaceted here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, and this has been a good conversation. Again, like I said, it's a conversation we'll probably be having for the entirety of the summer. But there is definitely, I think, the overarching theme of this conversation for the last 25 minutes, as he has been, the opportunity to kind of view Danny Zhilkin. I mean, there's another guy who hopefully the Jets are going to give him a 10-game run. Like if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, I'm pulling Gus Nyquist out of the lineup and I'm putting Danny Zhilkin in for the last 10 games. And I'm saying, let's see what we've got in this kid who was declared a number one center in the American Hockey League. What do we have in him? He's got 11 goals, 11 assists for the Moose. But much like the rest of the team, nobody is tearing it up from a points perspective. But what do you have in Zhilkin? Why not let Danny Zhilkin get a 10-game run? The only reason I didn't put him in there as he is because we don't know. It's an emergency week. He could be back with the Moose, on Tuesday in Toronto. So we don't know if, I should say, with the Moose in Toronto, not with the Jets, of course. They'll be in Chicago on Tuesday. But that's a player who I would run with because, again, we've seen him at the American Hockey League level. He's proven what he can do. Let's see what he can do. 10 games, give him that run, give him that leash to say, okay, here you go. We're gonna evaluate you for the final 10 games. So that to me is a guy who I think, and you asked about Nino and Vlad. I believe Scott Arneal told us yesterday that they will be on the trip, as will Colin Miller, but he kind of hinted that they could be a possibility towards the end of the road trip, which I think is, where do they go towards? Is that Utah or?
Well, they've got Chicago Tuesday, then they've got Dallas Thursday.
Yeah. Where do they end though? Is it Utah or St. Louis?
Hold on. Just give me 1 second here and I'll look it up. They end off against Columbus.
Oh, so it's none of the above. Okay. All right. I remember I was joking saying that. Could you imagine if Rick Bowness is the guy who actually sends the Jets to the golf course? But
you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that would be something. All right. Well, this has been a good conversation. We appreciate everyone's thoughts, their insight, their analysis. Well, that's our analysis, but we appreciate you appreciating that. If you did, if you didn't, well, complain to Ezzy. And we're going to head to commercial break. While we do, smash that like button. And when we come back, Meghan Angley, Guerilla Sports, she's going to bring us the all things Colorado perspective for tonight's Jets and Avs game.
I want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling sites instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre.
Boys, I've made an important life decision, and I need your support.
Oh, boy.
I've decided to get a grill.
You mean a barbecue grill for cooking? Like, that's not an important life decision, Ezzy.
No. A grill for my teeth.
A grill for your teeth? Do I even want to know why you're doing this?
It's simple, really. Every time I go to Holt Dental, I get treated so very well by Dr. John and his team that I need to keep finding additional reasons to go back. I rely on Holt Dental for all of my dental needs, and they do it all, from regular cleanings to cosmetic dentistry. Plus, they have free parking at their front door, and you know how much I love my convenient parking.
For all your dental needs, Illegal Curve recommends Holt Dental, conveniently located on Taylor Avenue near Grant Park Mall. For more information, visit them online at holtdental.ca.
For over 40 years, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has been Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy. Renowned in the comedy world as a must-play venue, Rumors has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers, wedding socials, and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase show tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey Winnipeg, Joe Carter here. I look forward to joining you in Winnipeg on June 4th for the Rady JCC Ken Cronson Sports Dinner. See you in June. Don't be late.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It's been a fast morning, Ezzy. It's gone by real quick. We're setting you up for the Jets and the Avs. And in order to do that best, to give an Avs perspective like no other, we head out to Denver to bring in Meghan Angley of Guerilla Sports. Hey, Meghan, how are you?
Hi, guys. How's it going? Good morning.
We're good. Good morning.
Well, Meghan, we were like you last year. Whenever we were talking about the Winnipeg Jets, all we were talking about was winning. All they did was win. The Colorado Avalanche now, all they do is win. What's it been like covering the Avs this season?
Yeah, it's been awesome. You know, they obviously have a really strong start to the year to where when they're without Taves and Landeskog ahead of that Olympic break, they went through what was considered a little bit of a rough patch, and it just meant that they weren't on a winning streak, or that some of the games they had to more decisively close. And so I think it's been interesting to see how the fan base reacts to some of the injuries that have cropped up in the back half of the season that have maybe led to some inconsistency down the stretch. But it's been so much fun just because straight out of training camp, you could see there was a very serious attitude around the room just because of the discontent from the way that the Dallas Avs series finished last year.
Meghan, I wanted to start off by asking you about Nazem Kadri, who Jets fans just saw recently. He picked up an assist in the Avalanche's 3-2 win a couple of nights ago. It just seemed like to me when the Avalanche acquired Kadri, and there had been rumors out there, but it just seemed like that was like the exact perfect move, right? Like it just seems like slot him in as your third line center. You've got McKinnon and Brock Nelson ahead of him, and it's worked out. Like it just seems like it's worked out just like they expected.
Yeah, I think with them getting Nick Waugh just before it, and the timeline, the way it appears to have played out, was they probably were interested in Kadri from the jump, had a door closed initially, but they were going to circle back, so they get Nick Waugh. And so I imagine the player perspective and seeing that the Avs weren't going to stop at addressing center depth with Nick Waugh, and they were going to take another swing at Nazem Kadri in the final hour of the deadline, really solidified the front office belief in where this team was headed. And then the obvious fit, going back to why he worked so well in 2022, was a huge boost to this team now, just because you see some of the things that they're able to do to course correct on the power play. It's struggled all year. I think his familiarity with the Avs power play and how it worked when Mikko Rantanen was there has helped them to find some success right now, and that was a really big need for them. And then just the energy that he brings. He's a lot of fun. He's friends with a lot of the guys on the team. And even when he needed to play wing at the start because they were still banged up a bit, it was just a huge infusion to their top six. And I think it's only going to get better for that like top 9 forward core picture when he's able to play at center like we've seen here lately.
Well, sorry, Dave, I was just going to add a follow-up question. Like, Meghan, do you see Kadri kind of playing both? Like, I know, like you've mentioned, I should have mentioned that he was playing wing before, I think because of Waugh's injury, right? And then he moved to the third line center. Like, do you see Jared Bednar kind of using him as both, or do you see him probably being used more as a winger or center?
I see more as a center. Even Kadri said that he hadn't played wing in a very long time at this level. And so there were some growing pains in that experiment that you lived with because they were dealing with so many injuries. But I think the preference from everyone was to have Kadri playing the true center position.
Meghan, speaking of guys who missed big gaps of time, got to ask about Gabriel Landeskog. I mean, what a story. It's still incredible to think, like when I look at his hockey page and see 4 years of regular season having missed, and all of a sudden now he's got 50 games. I think, I can't remember. He's got 10 goals, 21 assists or something of that nature. But from your perspective, what has it meant having a captain back on this team? I mean, obviously he came back for the playoffs, and even then we weren't certain, right? Last year, it seemed like he was training. He was, was it going to be more of a good story that he'd be training again, but not really playing? And obviously he played some games for the Avs, but for him to be out there for the full season, knowing how important he is for this group, what's it been like to have him around?
It's been a night and day difference, and it's something Jared Bednar will kind of laugh about in pressers whenever we ask about his impact, and the compelling record of the Avs with and without Landeskog in the lineup, to include this year when he missed a little bit of time, says a lot about what he adds when he's on the ice. But there's the obvious component too of what he adds in the room, and you can see in games where he's not playing because he's out for injury, the kind of like when the game breaks down for them, they're kind of missing that right messaging, right time from Gabriel Landeskog as a leader who is able to get them back on track, because it's not an instant gratification game. And so sometimes their process, it's not always going to reward them immediately when they need to get back within their structure. And Gabriel Landeskog is really good at keeping the focus on that end goal inside games. And that's how they're able to pull back some of the comeback wins that we've seen this year. There were a lot of games decided outside of regulation where they were picking up some points early on. And Landeskog's leadership is a huge part of that. And then just his battle and compete, like when you look at the stretch without him, some of the reason why they weren't winning those games is they were getting out battled. And so he has a way of dragging other players into the fight with him just because they want to go to war with a player and a leader like that. So his impact is tremendous. And I know it's dramatic to say, but I just don't know if the Avs can do it without him.
No, absolutely. And I agree. The record, I think it's 4 regulation losses this year, right, Meghan, with Landeskog in the lineup, which is just ridiculous. And then they're 500 with him out of the lineup, right? So those numbers speak for themselves. So I don't think you can overstate Landeskog's importance, right? Like you just talked about. I don't think you can talk about this Avalanche team, at least I don't think you can talk about this Avalanche team without talking about their goaltending, right? Like before the Olympics here in Canada, we obviously don't have the top end American talent like the Americans do in net with Hellebuck and Jake Ottinger. And I threw out Scott Wedgwood, and I wasn't the only person that threw out Scott Wedgwood as a possible goalie for Team Canada. And he's played, a few more games than Mackenzie Blackwood. And I'm not sure if we know yet who's going to play tonight, Meghan. I'm not sure if you know. I think, it would make sense to think that maybe it's Wedgwood tonight, but Blackwood definitely played well against the Jets 2 nights ago. But what are your kind of overarching thoughts about the goaltending? Because this, to me, is the best goaltending the Avalanche have had in a number of years, including, when they acquired Darcy Kemper and they won the Cup in 22.
Yeah, and they needed to turn to Pavel Francouz in that Western Conference final because of injury. And you hope that never happens with your starting goaltender in the playoffs. But having 2 really great goaltenders that you can turn to is important for that reason. And what Scott Wedgwood has done this year has been an incredible storyline. He talks about it pretty candidly, too, how everywhere he's gone, he's been labeled as a journeyman. And I feel like he bucked a trend when he came to Colorado after kind of a rough start in Nashville, a season ago. And his results have been consistent ever since. And so I like to point out that his body of work is bigger than just the success he's had this season. It goes back to when he was traded to the Avs originally. And because of how consistent it's been, it gives me a lot of confidence in the goaltender that he is. He had to carry more of a starter's workload at the start of this year because Mackenzie Blackwood was dealing with, recovering from a procedure he had in the off season, and he stepped up and he gave them some of those consistent results. And he's made saves that he doesn't need to. He's bailed the Avs out. He is highly competitive. In a scrambly way, you can see the way he fights for it in net, in the same way that I think Mackenzie Blackwood's highly competitive in his mentality. And so I think this is good pressure for Mackenzie Blackwood, who I'll stop short of saying, has had the starter set taken from him. But I do want to see him sort of fight to solidify his title as a starter, just in response to such stellar play from Wedgwood, because Wedgwood stepping up didn't take away my belief in Mackenzie Blackwood, but it has put a little bit of an emphasis on everything that Mackenzie Blackwood does. And so I think he's been a fine goaltender for the Avs this year too, but because he's missed a little bit of time, Scott Wedgwood's body of work is very compelling.
So Meghan, I've got another question, but I guess the one question I would have, because if you look at the splits, like I think Wedgwood has 39 and Blackwood has 33. So is there a defined, is this, I know the teams are sometimes going to these idea of platoons in the playoffs. Has Avalanche coach Jared Bednar given any sort of indication as to which goalie he's going to run with, or would it be that platoon type of situation?
Yeah, he has given some indication for who he'd run with as the guy right now in this home stretch, and it's been Wedgwood, because I don't know if it's a little bit of a cop-out, but basically he'll say that he'll turn to the guy that's giving him the best right now, and that is Scott Wedgwood. I think, though, just based on what I've seen when they've tried to go from one goalie to the other, thinking of like Swayman, Ullmark in Boston, that is not really ideal for the Avs to consider like going one to the other. I think that whoever they start game one of playoffs, they should ride with for the most part, unless injury crops up. And so I still think that's Mackenzie Blackwood, but this back half of the year is going to be really interesting, because I think that Mackenzie Blackwood kind of has to stand on his head to really finish on a high note, because Scott Wedgwood is right there. And if they turn to him in playoffs, I think they'll stay with him.
So Meghan, one of the guys that I know Jets fans were wanting to get to acquire from the Islanders was Brock Nelson, Minnesota kid, about to play I think he's 9 away from 1,000 games. What is his full addition? Obviously, you guys had him after the trade deadline, but what's it been like having him for the entirety of the season? I know it started off slow with him, but it seems like he's really settled in.
Yeah, you'll never catch me saying a bad thing about Brock Nelson, just because even in the tough stretch for him at the start of the year, he does so many great things defensively, even to spring offense some of the time, whether it's a stick lift, a stick check in his own end. And I think that he doesn't get enough credit for that side of his game. The other huge difference has been special teams. I know the power play has struggled, but when they have leaned on Brock Nelson more for their penalty kill this year, he wasn't utilized much in that role following the trade last year. They've had a ton of steady PK success just because he's winning those opening draws on the kill. And very similarly, he's doing the same thing for the Avs power play. Sometimes they'd have Nate take those draws, and there's a huge difference in their possession when it's Brock Nelson. And so I think the face-off wins has been a huge but quiet thing that he's added. His play away from the puck, his defensive side of the game, and then offensively, he just does have a pure goal scorer instinct, even though it can go a little bit quiet at times. I think that's just been, finding his rhythm with his line mates. Like when he's played with Val Nichushkin, those are both really long players who just at first glance could have similar traits in what they can do well. Obviously, you want Val Nichushkin being the guy to battle for pucks, but both can establish themselves at the net front. And so it's just been a matter of finding who and when to play those roles on that line that I think he's found a lot of success with the Avs this year.
Meghan, I'm going to stick with the guys from Minnesota because obviously we share a border in Manitoba with Minnesota. Folks in Manitoba go to Minnesota all the time. At least I know Dave and I have been there many times before. And that's Sam Malinsky, right? Like he's 7th on the team in scoring, which alone I think like would raise a lot of eyebrows. But this is only, I think, his 2nd full NHL season, and he's up to 32 points. And I was going to ask you in the NHL, but Malinsky specifically, what has kind of stood out to you about him? Because he's really impressed me. He can really skate.
Yeah, his skating too is where I think the conversation linked to Sam Girard really became stronger, just because Sam Girard has also been known for his skating, right? Like La Tournade. And this year, I feel like his skating maybe wasn't popping as much as before, whereas the mechanics of Malinsky's skating were. He is a really dynamic skater who, when he decides to activate and play deep in the offensive zone, whether he's, walking the blue line, he's really great vision from there. I'll talk about that in a second, but the way that he can drive inside ice and get through traffic because he is such a dynamic skater adds something a little different on the offensive side, but adds on the breakout too. His starts and stops along the wall can be a little bit deceptive to get skaters off his back. And then the other thing is, because he is in that undersized defenseman category, he's really gotten stronger just one year to the next. It's something he's put a lot of focus on. And so I think that he's much stronger in his skates than he gets credit for, and he's been trying to leverage that side of his game more to close out plays quickly in his own end and be reliable in that way. And so since the Sam Girard trade, he's been getting more penalty kill reps and bigger minutes. And so I do think there's absolutely a correlation. I think the tricky thing they had to navigate was having so many righties to include Malinsky, and Sam Girard was one of the few lefties. So I think that's where getting Brett Kulak back in that trade was really important for them. But in terms of the dynamic skating of Malinsky, there's a heaviness in his shot that separates him from Girard, and there's an accuracy. So he's really great vision to find those lanes to the net that have led to a lot of goals that have had teammates, maybe a redirect or a tip in that shot lane. But he poses a threat like Makar from the blue line, but like from a second or third pair, and I think it snuck up on teams. And then Brett Kulak stepping in, he's been one of my favorite players because of how steady and reliable he is defensively. And Malinsky, having played with him a little bit after that trade, is getting kind of that muscle memory of seeing those decisions that Brett Kulak makes on the penalty kill in particular, that I think only makes him a better defenseman. So I have really liked Malinsky's game stepping up the way that it has, and then Brett Kulak being so steady. I can see why he has been to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals.
Although Meghan Samolinsky might not like the Josh Manson punch on his former Cornell teammate, Morgan Barron, that one might he's got divided loyalty in that regard. But the guy I want to ask you about is Brent Burns, because, he's just such a fun story, and, his games played and just the continuous, he just doesn't seem to miss a beat. So what has he kind of added to this Colorado mix? Because of course, he was with Carolina before, but joins Colorado, it doesn't seem to miss a beat, just seems to be a seamless part of the team.
Yeah, I think that his shot first instinct really was inspiring for the Avs back end, especially at the start of this year. That's not necessarily something that like Taves Makar need to be coached into, but I think even Makar, following the difficult Dallas series last year, maybe didn't trust his shot as much at the start of the year as he should have, and Brent Burns just will let it rip. And so I think there was a lot of fun around seeing Brent Burns play that way, that you saw more of the Avs back end just shooting, and it was giving them really good results. And then specifically, there's an offensive side to Manson's game. I think he has sneaky puck skill and pace that getting to play with someone like Brent Burns, who also wants to get involved in that way, has just been fun for both of them. They're both really vocal guys, and Brent Burns has a lot of energy. And so obviously the big body too. I know people have maybe been frustrated with him, like coming out of the Olympic break, he was dealing with a little bit of illness. People have worried the age caught up with him, but what he brings on the penalty kill, there's a reason that's one of the first D out for Jared Bednar. And it's because he is able to utilize his size and length to take away lanes. Like, it's not necessarily the most punishing presence at the net front, but he knows how to make those reads and utilize his size in that way. And so that's been a part of their penalty kill success. It's helped to alleviate some of that burden in those minutes from Taves and Makar, with Brent Burns eating up some of it.
And, we have to mention, I don't think you mentioned it, Megan. I was trying to pay attention to every single word you were saying, obviously, but 1,568 regular season games and 135 playoff games, still doesn't have a Stanley Cup ring. So I think if the Avalanche are successful, and I don't think I'm getting too far ahead of myself here, because the Avalanche have a good chance of winning the President's Trophy, and I think are the best team in the league right now. I think who Nathan MacKinnon is handing that cup off to first if they win it. It's probably going to be Brent Burns, right? But I wanted to ask you about MacKinnon, because here in Canada, obviously, we're still, don't give it to us too hard. We're still, recovering from America beating us in the Olympic gold medal game. Nathan MacKinnon, I know you saw the chance that he had on Connor Hellebuck. It's going to, I think, haunt not just Nathan MacKinnon, but Canadian fans for a while. Devon Taves, another Avalanche, had a pretty good chance in that game too, right, Megan? But yeah, obviously you're not focused on that. You're focused on your boys winning. But how much do you think Nathan MacKinnon has used his Olympic experience not winning gold against the U.S.? Like, is it ridiculous to say that? Or do you think, that's maybe almost made him want to win another cup even more?
Oh, absolutely. I think that Nate likes meaningful hockey, and it doesn't take much to convince him of how winning is meaningful to him. And so, I think this back half of the year, his sights have been set on bigger, with playoffs in mind, just because you could see the intensity he played with in Olympics, that it meant a lot to him. So I find that Nate can channel some of that disappointment into something very productive, and it can even be scary for teams playing opposite of him when he gets into that frame of mind. And so that's what I expect for playoffs. And I think too, in the past, sometimes that's been Nate steering that ship himself, but he has so much support in the way that this team is constructed that it's such a good thing for him. I think Marty Netchus in particular, having the year that he's having, has been really helpful for Nate to shine individually, just because those two play off of each other really well. So I will say I was actually very torn in the gold medal game because of how many Avs are represented on Team Canada. And I remember that Taves chance very well. I feel like it was a behind the back paddle save from Hellebuck that will haunt me in my nightmares too. But I have said I've wanted Hellebuck to play like gold medal Hellebuck in these final games against the Avs to really test them. So I hope I don't come back to regret saying that.
I don't know, Megan. Sorry, Dave. I know you're going to jump in with the last question here for Megan. I don't know if you saw, Megan, but the Tkachuk brothers on their, sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the Tkachuk brothers podcast, but they had Hellebuck on their podcast. And in the middle of the podcast, Hellebuck went upstairs and he showed them the stick that had the mark of the save on it. I don't know if you saw that. You could probably
No.
like search it out. But yeah, so obviously Hellebuck's not going to be forgetting that one either.
Wow, I'm gonna have to go look that up, but
Yeah.
it's tough. Like, I get to see the work that Taves, McCarr, McKinnon put in every day, and so that disappointment is disappointing for me too. They work very hard and they care so much, and they're obviously elite players.
Well, Megan, they are elite players. And like in Winnipeg, you look at these elite players and you think, okay, well, how is it that the power play is powerless? And in Winnipeg, when you look at the power play, somehow they're ranked 26, which makes no sense given how good their first unit, second unit's a work in progress, but the first unit specifically should not be the 26th ranked power play. The Avs, though, are the 27th ranked power play. And given that they've got even more talent than the Winnipeg Jets, is it? And we were speculating.
We don't get it, Megan. Please make it make sense.
Well, we were talking about it and we thought it's almost like there's almost too much talent and that they're all deferential to the other and that they don't want to be seen as selfish. I don't know what it is, but what is it that you're seeing with a team that should not be the 27th ranked power play?
Yeah, I think it's been different things at different points in the year, which makes it hard for them to find one permanent solution because they'll implement something, they'll see some success, and then it will stop working. But what I think it's boiled down to, and I draw a lot back to the Dallas series and how that PK really contained the Avs top unit in a way that decided the series. So I think that haunts them a little bit. And so some of the ways that they like to create on the power play, I think became predictable to that Stars PK. And as a result this year, I think that they wanted to try and find ways around that. And they were forcing set plays a little too harshly. And when those initial ideas that they drew up before the drop of the puck didn't come to fruition, they were almost stunted. And so sometimes you'd see the power play go a little bit stagnant. Sometimes you would see them overcomplicating it, overpassing. And so when they'd catch a pass, they would handle it. And in those seconds, they dust the puck off looking for where they'd like to send it. The PKs picked up on what they'd like to do. And so that made it predictable. But I think in an effort to try and make it a more complicated play, it actually just became more predictable. And then in doing that too, sometimes those passes one too many, trying to get through the bumper, through the slot, just gets picked off. And so I think that they just needed to uncomplicate the power play. And similarly, they've made Nate more dangerous and moving him more so below the goal line and putting Marty Netches kind of in that left circle spot, partly because that's where he's played in Carolina and because Nate as a rover can be even more dangerous. It's not to say he can't still be the shot option from that left side and operate in that way, but I just think that they were trying to force guys to find success the way they have in the past. And without Mikko Rantanen, the power play has to look a little bit different.
All right. Well, there you go. That is the Jets opponent. And we get as much insight as we're ever going to get out of Denver, courtesy of Meghan Angley of Guerilla Sports. Megan, thanks very much for spending some time with us this Saturday morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay,
Thanks,
take care. We'll see you later.
Bye.
There she goes. That's Meghan Angley of, I just lost my whole screen, Ezzy. All right, we're back. I don't know what I did. I went to change something.
We didn't lose you, I don't think, Dave. You're good.
No, I think I'm still here, but somehow I went to hit a button and my whole screen went black. I'm wearing black, but it went to black. Well, let's go to commercial because somehow like this, as we've shot through almost 2 hours of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Hopefully you've hit that subscribe button. Hopefully you have smashed the like button. I don't see Phyllis in the chat. She's not here to tell you. So I'm here to tell you. I'm Dave Manuk. He's Ezzy Ginsburg. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
I want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre.
Boys, I've made an important life decision, and I need your support.
Oh boy.
I've decided to get a grill.
You mean a barbecue grill for cooking? Like, that's not an important life decision, Ezzy.
No. A grill for my teeth.
A grill for your teeth? Do I even want to know why you're doing this?
It's simple, really. Every time I go to Holt Dental, I get treated so very well by Dr. John and his team that I need to keep finding additional reasons to go back. I rely on Holt Dental for all of my dental needs, and they do it all, from regular cleanings to cosmetic dentistry. Plus, they have free parking at their front door, and you know how much I love my convenient parking.
For all your dental needs, Illegal Curve recommends Holt Dental, conveniently located on Taylor Avenue near Grant Park Mall. For more information, visit them online at holtdental.ca.
For over 40 years, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has been Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy. Renowned in the comedy world as a must-play venue, Rumors has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers, wedding socials, and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase show tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey Winnipeg, Joe Carter here. I look forward to joining you in Winnipeg on June 4th for the Rady JCC Ken Cronson Sports Dinner. See you in June. Don't be late.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minucci. He's Ezzy Ginsberg. And Ezzy, this show has been brought to you by our friends at Play Now. Earn a $5 sports bonus bet for each Jets power play goal scored when you place a qualifying same-game parlay wager on a Jets regular season game. Conditions apply. Bet with Play Now, the official betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets. 18 plus. Enjoy responsibly.
I just wanted to clarify something earlier because I saw some people in the chat talking about it. Drew doesn't actually have gout. He's just off for this morning show. So he actually is okay. He's in full health. But that doesn't mean that does. Yeah. I mean, he's not sick. Let's put it that way.
Well,
but that doesn't mean that hashtag gout watch 2026 still isn't on, but he currently doesn't have gout. I just wanted to clarify that because we mentioned that earlier. And then some people I think maybe thought we were serious, Dave, with the amount of meat he purchased, but he is okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Gout watch is on.
Rob Mahoney just wrote Drew has gout fact. I mean, if it's written in the internet, I kind of believe it. So I'm going to go with Rob's insight. I'm pretty sure he's Drew's internist. So there we go. Thank you, Rob, for that insight into Drew and his gout watch 2026. Anyways, Ezzy, somehow this show has flown by, and yet we still got more programming coming your way later this evening. Game time, 6 o'clock Central, Jets and the Avalanche, the Winnipeg Jets news. Everything on illegalcurve.com. We've got you covered. We got the pregame report all ready to go. We've got the morning papers for all the latest Jets news. Make sure you check the notes, Ezzy. If you want to know what's going on with Jets prospects, then make sure you're checking the notes section.
Oh, I read big game-winning goal for Kieran Walton last night.
Big game-winning goal for Kieran Walton is ranked the 2024 sixth-rounder. Joe from Winnipeg would not be happy if I didn't mention him, as he had and it wasn't just a game-winning goal. It was an OT game-winning goal for the Petes to even their series. That's his first goal of the playoffs for Peterborough. Jacob Cloutier, I thought they were going to win. He didn't have any points, but he and Saginaw lost. And then Edison Engel, as your boy, the 2025 sixth-rounder. Brantford, they won, the Bulldogs, but he didn't have any points. And then out to the WHL, Owen Martin, Spokane. They were looking good after the first period. Up 3-1, Owen Martin had his first playoff goal. Only problem is hockey is a 60-minute game, and his team got pummeled by Prince George in the remaining 40 minutes. In fact, they got outshot 22-3 in the second period alone, and they ended up losing 6-3 to Prince George. And as last but not least, over in the NCAA, it was a regional semifinals, and both Denver and Garrett Brown, the 2022 fourth rounder, and Zach Naring, the 2023 third rounder with Denver, they didn't have any points for their teams last night, but both teams advanced, and they will be facing each other in the regional finals in Colorado on Sunday. So if the Jets want, Ezzy, they can go see the Jets tonight in Colorado and then go watch two of their prospects play tomorrow afternoon in the regional finals on their way to one of them will be heading and advancing to the Frozen Four.
Like it, like that little prospect update.
There
It's
you
not
go.
just the Jets and the Moose that we cover. We cover the OHL, we cover the WHL, we cover the NCAA. Dave M brings it all to you.
I try to make sure that we've got every team covered as best we can. I could tell folks we could do a Manuk Moose Minute, Ezzy, but maybe we'll save it for later. The Moose are also in action today. They have a rematch with Belleville. Things are looking good for the Moose. I'll go quick. Things were looking good for the Manitoba Moose. They were going to go 11-7. Tyrell Bauer looked like he was going to draw in. He didn't because Reese Vitelli, as he the Winnipegger, who arrived late because, of course, the Moose lost Parker Ford and Danny Zhilkin. So they ended up getting Reese Vitelli in the lineup. So they were able to give Tyrell Bauer one more night off. Probably a good thing as he's continuing to recover from his big fight the other day. A week ago today, I think. And so the Moose, though, they were looking okay. And then all of a sudden, as 3 straight goals by Belleville in 2 minutes, 23 seconds. Arthur Kaliev, you remember that name? He had 2 goals in, I think, a minute and a half or 2 minutes.
Former LA King.
Yeah, and then he scored his hat-trick goal to make it a 5-0 game. And then there was a bit of a sad incident because there was a medical emergency that necessitated the game ending. So there was 3 minutes and 18 seconds to go in the third period. It's very weird. I've never seen this before. They actually dropped the puck and then just ran the clock out. And then the players went to the respective rooms. We hope everything's okay with that fan. Second time that's happened, the Moose were in Laval. The last time that happened early in January or mid-January. So twice now that one ended with about 1:17 to go. This one 3:18. Not that it mattered. All we hope for is the best outcome for that fan and the Moose, who are, again, folks are asking if they're going to miss the playoffs. They won't because they're 11 points up on Rockford, who's not making the playoffs. And so, but the Moose are definitely, losing 4 straight and 5 of their last 6, killing their chance. They could have caught Chicago for the second spot. They could have caught Texas easily for third and given themselves home ice. And they could at least have maintained 4th and have home ice in their play-in series upcoming against Milwaukee, if that's where things play out. Even that looks like it's in doubt because Milwaukee, who were losing to Henderson yesterday, 2-0 after 40, ended up coming back and winning in overtime. So now the Admirals are just 1 point back. So the Moose, even though they're shorthanded, they're going to have to get going in today.
They need a dub tonight.
And the last thing I'll mention, because I was watching it while I was doing some work on illegalcurve.com for this morning, got to talk about that Brandon Calgary game as he went to triple overtime in the WHL. I think it was the longest game. It's one of the longest overtime games. And it was funny. It was kind of like one of those years. I was kind of, obviously, Manitoba-based show, kind of hoping for Brandon. But Calgary ends up taking it 1-0 in triple overtime. So a lot of fun. But hey, you know what? We're gonna have to rest our vocal cords here, because we've done a lot of talking, but we've got a lot more show to come tonight. We expect everyone to join us. So go and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Smash that like button, subscribe. This, of course, is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Any final words as for you before we say goodnight or good afternoon for the rest of the day?
Oh, just great show today. Big thanks to Dan Robertson and Meghan Angley for joining us, and excited to watch the Jets Avalanche play, even though the Jets playoff hopes are slim, to say the least, Dave.
Yeah.
They're still in the race. So I'm looking forward to doing another post-game show with you, and obviously looking forward to seeing everybody in the chat. So we'll see you guys around 8:45, 8:45, depending on if the game goes to overtime. But yeah, we'll do it up again tonight, and looking forward to it.
We will indeed. So thank you very much for joining us and spending your Saturday morning with us. And a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the post-game show, the Saturday show, and the website, illegalcurve.com, a possibility. They are in no particular order as Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Play Now, Holt Dental, City Place, Wheatland Hockey, Boston Pizza, the Rady JCC Sports Dinner with keynote speakers, Joe Carter and Cito Gaston. Taking place Thursday, June 4th, 2026. Tickets available at radyjcc.com. Support these 5 businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey.
There's nothing better, by the way. Yeah, Dave Manuk. Dan Manuk has a comment up there. There is nothing better than my favorite lawyer in Winnipeg, Daniel Manuk, commenting on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Shout out to Dan.
There you go. Dan, my bro, giving me throwing a little shade my way. Thanks, Dan. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to Ezra Ginsburg. I'm Dave Manuk. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll be back tonight with the Illegal Curve postgame show.